Imagine a life where you feel vibrant and full of energy. Now make it a reality with TakeYourSupplements.com. Ditch the endless trial and error of supplement selection. Our trained health coaches are here to craft a personalized health regimen that truly works for you. Visit TakeYourSupplements.com and learn how easy it is to start feeling better today. Your health is an investment, not an expense. Visit TakeYourSupplements.com today and get a free health consultation. You know, when I heard about these specific supplements over 12 years ago, I heard about them back in 2010. And the first thing that went through my mind was, that sounds too expensive. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of money, but I also had a ton of health problems. And it wasn't until years later that I finally gave it a try. And I couldn't believe that I had stopped myself, that I had limited myself because I had decided somewhere that it sounded too expensive without even doing the research. And it turns out I was able to fit it into my budget, and I started feeling better immediately. Within 5 days of taking these supplements, I began to get my energy back. My chronic adrenal fatigue began to go away. Within 3 months, I no longer had type 2 diabetes. Within 2 years, I no longer had polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I was able to conceive naturally. I was told I'd never be able to have kids when I was 19 after a battery of tests with an endocrinologist. So when you have these health goals and have these health dreams, but they've been crushed by a doctor or crushed by family members or crushed by your own belief system, I invite you to break through that and to challenge anyone, including yourself, who's ever told you that you can't have perfect health, that you can't have optimal health. Because at TakeYourSupplements.com, we have some amazing health coaches that want to show you the way to support your body's ability to heal itself. Your body is amazing and miraculous. We grew from these tiny cells into 37.2 trillion cells. Your body has a God-given ability to heal itself. And what we have to do is give it the raw building blocks it needs to build healthy cells. And that's what the coaches at TakeYourSupplements.com are here for. They're here to show you the foods to avoid and the foods to eat to nourish your body, and the supplements to fill in those gaps, those nutrient gaps, so that your body's getting, and every cell is getting, every key nutrient it needs to create optimal health. I've been working with these supplements for over 12 years now with my clients and with my family and with myself. And I can't believe how many illnesses and how many health challenges I have seen people overcome. And you can too. Go to TakeYourSupplements.com. Give it a try. The only thing you have to lose is all of your health complaints. TakeYourSupplements.com. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 523. I am so excited for today's guest. We have with us Dr. Scott Vrzal. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, and people who are sick of suffering are going to be singing your praises. My heart is so full right now because I know that some of my listeners are just so done with the suffering and the pain. And today you're here to deliver the information that they've been praying for so that they can no longer be in pain. So welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. Yes, that's why I got into it, because I was suffering and I wanted that victory for others.
Exactly. You know, that's why I started the podcast also.
Yeah.
I started this podcast 8 years ago because I was suffering for so many years from several major medical issues, and I used holistic medicine to get better. After being with MD medicine for so many years and under the MD's care, I got worse, not better. I felt sicker, not better. And then found true holistic medicine. There's a lot of people these days that call themselves holistic that aren't. So you have to buyer beware. The true holistic medicine. And I found my mentors, and not only did they help me get better through true holistic medicine. True holistic medicine is supporting your body's ability to heal itself and getting out of your body's way. Stop doing the
Right.
things that are hindering your body from achieving homeostasis, right? And then
Right.
giving your body what it's missing in order for the body to do the healing. Your body wants to heal. It wants to come back into balance.
It
And these
does.
simple changes make such a profound difference. But sometimes, no matter what we do, like in the instance of headaches, sometimes it's like no matter what we try, even when we go to holistic practitioners, there's still the pain is still there, and we're left so frustrated, or the imbalance is still there. And that's why we want to come to Dr. Scott V. I know you like to be called
Hmm.
Dr. V.
Thank
We
you.
want to come to you. A little plug, your website is headacheadvantage.com, and we're going to get into how you help people. And of course, we want to talk about your story and what led you to this. But before we do, I got to share a little story about a headache in my life with you.
Please.
And that, because you had asked before we hit record, you're like, so do you have any headaches? I'm like, well, let's hit record so we can get started, because my husband, who has never suffered with headaches, unless, like we lived in Las Vegas and like he forgot to drink water, like, and that's, you do that once or twice. Those dehydration headaches are the worst, right? So you do that a few
Right.
times, you learn your lesson, you learn to always travel with water with you. And other than that, he never suffered from headaches. 2 years ago, he moved in with his parents for 5 months and lived in a bed beside his dad and did 24-hour hospice care till his
Wow.
dad passed away. And
Wow.
what was amazing was him and his dad didn't have like the best of relationships. His dad
Mm.
never said, I love you. Like he was a very stoic person. And on his deathbed, he said to my husband was 54 years old, heard I love you from his dad for the first time. Like it was a beautiful experience. They both bonded. I believe it was a very like just healing, cathartic experience.
Wow.
So, when he passed away, we weren't all torn up. We had spent a lot of time processing it. It wasn't like it was this sudden thing. It was slow, and we pretty much did our grieving and our processing while he was still alive, while he was, going downhill.
Hmm.
And right the day he died, my husband had to get a root canal, which was botched. And so they extracted the tooth.
Ooh.
And it was the tooth 15, all the way back, molar 15.
Mm.
He proceeded to develop, and this is about 2 years ago, he proceeded to develop constant chronic headaches. And now we go to naturopathic doctors, we eat super clean. He goes to a really good chiropractor, acupuncturist. Like we went down the list,
Hmm.
could not figure out what was going on. And we went from practitioner to practitioner. We tried everything, homeopathy, everything. Some things like worked a little bit temporarily. He had all kinds of different fascial massages. He went to 3 different types of manipulative massages. And these headaches would come on around 11 a.m. every day, almost every day. Sometimes it was every other day. Sometimes you get a break and it'd be every 3 days. But this was for 2 years, and they were
Wow.
so bad. It was like I describe it like a migraine in his neck, and it would
Mm.
radiate. So it was a tension headache. It would radiate up into his head, typical of either a scalene's trigger point, or sometimes it would move and be an upper trapezius trigger
Yeah.
point. So very like typical radiation, like radiating pain pattern. And also he had ischemia in those muscles. The muscles were really hard, like hard as a rock, and we would strip them and get heat on them and everything, but we couldn't get the pain to go away. And no practitioner could figure out what was wrong, other than he had this problem that would come on and then release 6 to 8 hours later. So he would have this pain, but it was like a migraine because he could barely drive. He couldn't talk, he could barely talk, he'd be wincing. And then afterwards, it was like a neurological event. He would be left completely exhausted the rest of the day, could not function, like just
Wow.
zero function. And so it was like he was going through a migraine, in that it would exhaust him, and also it would take all of his effort, all of his concentration away. I was talking to so many different naturopaths and trying to figure out like what's the next course of action, because I knew that there was an answer out there. And one of my good naturopathic friends said, you should try going to Dr. Jeff Harris, who does prolotherapy, and he also teaches it. And so my husband's been seeing him, and now he went from between one and a headache every day to a headache every 3 days to two a month with the
Great.
prolotherapy. And we're on to something, because the prolotherapy, Dr. Jeff Harris went, there's something going on with your spleen channel, tooth 15. My husband has a giant scar by his spleen because he had an accident. He almost lost his spleen when he was 9. And also the headaches would start at the same time in Chinese medicine as the spleen time.
Right.
And it's interesting because every problem my husband's ever had has always been on his left side. And that's where the headache is. And that's where the spleen is.
channel.
And the problem is, so it would all kind of added up, but and he's had a few sessions, and just with a few sessions, it's gone from, like I said, between one every day or one every 3 days to only two a month. So we still don't know like 100% why, but I definitely feel like the trigger was the botched root canal when they pulled the tooth, right? And that kind of like everything leading up to that. Now, we also have explored, is it the stress of doing palliative care for several months with his dad and being in a weird bed and being in weird positions, having to pick up his dad off the floor and like all the things that could go wrong there. But the headaches didn't start till after the dental stuff. And
Yeah.
so that's my headache story, is that we tried everything. But one thing we saw that temporarily would shift it a bit is fasting. And well, of course, you're getting rid of all the kinds of foods that inflame, even though my husband eats clean, like, for example, corn, which I know can be inflammatory for some people, right? That
Right.
he might have it sometimes in his diet. We don't know what's giving him inflammation. So when you fast, it's like this amazing elimination diet, and you're left like, oh, wow, I feel so much better. Well, you might have been eating 90% good and 10% bad, and what's bad for you might be fine for someone else. So it didn't 100% get rid of his headaches, but we saw a huge shift. So we knew that like inflammation was a stressor that played a role, but it was multifaceted, and it's fascinating, and we couldn't quite figure it out. So I'm super interested in talking to you today, because I know that there are people out there suffering from headaches, and a headache doesn't just have to be in the head, right? It can like start in the neck and radiate up, like I said with my husband.
Right.
But there's so many different ways that we can approach it to help the body. But the most important thing I feel is to listen to the body and figure out, why is the body speaking this language, right? Why is the body saying, hey, I'm so out of balance, I'm creating pain? And let it be a lesson. Let us learn from the body so that we can support the body heal itself. And I know that's what you do, and you've unlocked the secrets to listening to the body around headaches and how we can stop them. My first burning question is, do you also help people end migraines?
Absolutely. And so it all comes down to the location of the headache. Like in your husband's example, you said left-sided predominantly, but then a lot of what you were talking about sounded like all the way up to suboccipital on both sides. Is it both sides or
No,
or
it's
left?
it was typically left side,
Right.
which was like the typical pattern of, and sometimes now with all the therapy he's done, it stays in the neck, but it's like a
Right.
headache in the neck.
Yeah.
But sometimes it radiates just like an upper trapezius trigger point, which is on the left side of the occipital, all the way around the parietal, the temporal, and then kind of above the eye.
Right. Yeah. So a left-sided headache is going to be a stomach issue. Stomach, pancreas, and spleen, in acupuncture are all related and have their emotions of, the first and foremost in there is oversympathetic. So certainly your husband's having to take care of his dad, and, there was some strain there, and praise God, they were able to kind of get some resolution. Unfortunately, it was at the end, but that saves him a lifetime of challenge, right? Just solving that emotional, to finally hear "I love you" from his dad, which we all need to hear. So dads, make sure you're doing that if you're listening, right? So left-sided headache is going to be a stomach, potentially spleen issue. And so we'd want to look at what else in his life, beyond the emotions. Yes, clearing, treating, desensitizing for those emotional challenges are going to help the stomach and the pancreas function better, and the spleen. Again, they're all in acupuncture related, especially emotionally. And that stomach meridian does a ram horn around the left side of the eye and down the neck, as you described, into the scalenes and so on. So the other potential, and why I asked, whether it was all left-sided or both, is the overzealous response to stress inhibits the thyroid and can cause the suboccipital. So when it's all the way up the neck and the back of the head, what people would typically call a tension headache, tends to do with that chronic cortisol secretion and ultimately a under-functioning thyroid. So we want to facilitate thyroid function in that case and the consequences of the chronic stress. That makes sense?
Yo, yeah. It totally, and it's so exciting that you are the expert. You're the headache guy. Everyone who has chronic headaches needs to know that you exist and then
Right.
go get help from you.
Thank you.
I was just 2 days ago talking to a friend of mine who is also in the holistic health space, and she was telling me about a client. She goes, I have a client who's had headaches since he was born, and both his mother and father have chronic headaches also. And the father now is on dialysis because he's been put on pain meds for so many years. And she goes, could it be that there's mold in their house? Like, we're trying to figure out, why does this whole family who lives under the same roof, why did they all have headaches? And I'm like, well, it might be, but it's also like there's so many factors, right? There's so many different reasons, but it's fascinating that the whole family suffers from headaches. So obviously we're looking at something that impacts all of them. It could be food, it could be mold, it could be, there's so many factors. Have you ever seen that where a whole family has headaches?
Right. So our first question in that sort of situation is, how are the family doing when they're away from the house? So if they go away to Disneyland for a week, do all their headaches go away symptomatically or historically? Then that helps us know that yes, it's something in the house. I mean, sure, certainly their diet's going to change when they travel, but I mean, yeah, mold. There's obviously many different types of mold, but I mean, one of the most common things is mold compromises the immune system, and can set up any number of symptoms. And yes, we see that often, and often with the testing that we do, we can even narrow it down to where in the house, in their bedroom window there's mold, or those types of things that are compromising a person's health. Typically in that scenario, obviously we want to remediate and get the mold out of the house, but then strengthen the lungs, because the lungs are chronically compromised from being challenged with the mold. So we want to do vitamins A and vitamin C certainly are typical antioxidants to facilitate lung function, for example, or even lung tissue, if you will, in a supplement to rebuild the lungs to help it handle the environment, especially while they're trying to remediate, while they're trying to get that mold out of their environment. Just had 2 of those yesterday, clinically, that we had to address. I mean, a fun story on that. Several of them, but one gal said, "You have mold in your bedroom," and she said, "No, you're crazy," and that kind of thing is often we hear, and she didn't really believe it or hadn't seen it, and then she went home and checked the window where it kind of narrowed it down to, pulled back the drapes and realized that there's a black stripe of mold down the middle of the window that's right over their bed, and realized she was sneezing 12 times every time she walked into the room, and she'd wake up in the morning feeling like doo-doo because she was sleeping with mold, inhaling mold all night.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was the good news, is that was an easy fix to just clean up the mold in the window and live happily ever after.
Right. And then, but also like do a little bit more investigating, because it might be deeper, right? And with mold, it's
Sure.
typically what you see is the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Yeah, I have a few really interesting interviews about mold remediation. It's worth listeners going to learntruehealth.com, typing in mold and listening to those. I have at least 5 episodes with mold remediators that will just blow your mind. But I was also thinking about that family and how what people often don't think about is that a lot of food sensitivities are passed down genetically, food allergies, food sensitivities, but also the microbiome. We share the same microbiome just because of exposure to one another, and microbiome, which is from our mouth to our anus, right? It's not just
Yes.
it's not just
Hmm.
in the big colon, like, and your microbiome's in your skin too. But as far as your digestion's concerned, it is the entire digestive tract has a microbiome. It's about 6 pounds of bacteria and either, good or bad microbes, depending on what you feed. You eat junk, you're feeding the bad army that lives inside you. You eat good, clean food, you're feeding the good army.
Yes.
But the thing is, it's so fascinating, and I have 2 interviews about this with the Viome experts. You can type in Viome at learntruehealth.com to listen to those. That the bacteria in your gut digest your food and produce chemicals. Now, some of these chemicals are really helpful, and some of them are harmful. And you can actually then have a reaction. So it's not necessarily that you're allergic to that food, but your microbiome is producing a chemical from that food that then makes you sick. So and if you're all eating the same because you're under the same roof and you share the same microbiome, like, it might not even show up on a blood test that you're allergic to that food, but when you remove that food, you start feeling better. So there's food. There's also, because we typically as families eat the same or very similar, we typically also suffer from the same nutrient deficiencies. Plus, with genetics, your genetics can determine which nutrients you're processing more of. Like, I just got some genetics testing back, and I think it's fascinating that my body burns through B12 and folate at a much faster rate than others do.
Right.
And so I have to be careful with and make sure that I'm on top of those nutrients for myself. So to your genetics, like, one person, and I see this all the time. I see my clients, like the wives, will say, "My husband can eat anything and he doesn't feel sick," and then I eat the same thing and I'm throwing up. I'm so sick. And or I feel miserable when I eat the way my husband eats. And his genetics are completely different. His microbiome, if you're fairly newlywed, are completely different. So you could live under the same roof, but there's so many factors. Do you have like a checklist that you go through? How do you go through all the factors that could be leading to headaches?
Right. There's so much in that statement you just had. I mean, first, I want to kind of shine light on the fact that that biome you're talking about, the lactobacillus organisms are the main producers of B12 or methylcobalamin, which is the main nutrient along with folic acid and B6. But those are the main nutrients that drive that methylation pathway that is so often, deficient in the genetic tests you're talking about. So, that's kind of how that correlates the whole biome with the proper detox of the liver, for example. That methylation pathway gets inhibited by stress, gets inhibited, when we're deficient in B12, which again is made from the microbiome, the gut microbiome. And so that is also, methylation activates the tumor suppressor gene. So, I mean, the long-term consequences of having, say, the B12 deficiency and underfunctioning methylation is opening the door for the big ugly stuff, unfortunately. So, I mean, that's how the whole body concept comes into play. Yeah, we can take B12. Let's correct that. But ultimately, eat your vegetables, right? Your green leafies and the foods that are going to feed those lovely lactobacillus organisms that are then going to be in, your buddies, if you will, to make the nutrients that you need to thrive and to flourish and to stay young. So, I mean, it all comes, the whole body concept really comes together. And to tie that in, as you were asking, with headaches, the reason the book is called The Headache Advantage is because, for me, clinically, a person will come in with, a list of 15 symptoms, for example, and one of my burning primary questions is, what area of the head hurts? So if they've got a whole list of, say, digestive related symptoms and pain in the left pectoral muscle and bicep tenderness, and all these other areas that are physically related to stomach, and then they have a left-sided headache, I know that stomach is going to be the be-all or the keystone to get rid of a lot of these other symptoms that are going to be tied to it. I mean, they could have colon, related symptoms, and it's going to manifest as low back pain, all these other things. But if their headache is on the left side, I know that fixing their stomach is going to take care of all these other symptoms, and so it saves me some pursuit and helps narrow down the pursuit of where the chief weakness is in that person's physiology. So it makes the clinical certainty and the effectiveness of our natural health care just kind of go through the roof utilizing that information.
When you say fixing the stomach, is this like that not I want to say metaphorical stomach, but is it like the traditional Chinese version of stomach, or is this like the Western version of, there's something literally wrong in your stomach? Or are you talking about all of digestion?
Yeah, great question. So in this case, we're talking about stomach specifically, and I talked about digestion as a whole. If they have symptoms, of digestion all up and down the track, if you will, but when when their pain is on the left side of the head, I know, as you called out, right, fixing the stomach, and fixing means either a structural change. Chiropractors are going to adjust T5 or C1 if there's allergies related to it. Basically, we want to look at what it's going to, so we got the structural aspect, then we've got the nutritional needs. Are they eating something that's compromising the way the stomach's functioning, or do they simply need nutrients like thiamine, vitamin B1, calcium, zinc, some of the nutrients to help make stomach acid? Or have they had, an emotional overload of, oversympathetic, low self-esteem, disgust type emotions that have then laid down, accumulated and compromised the way the stomach functioned? So that's the art of natural health care is identifying the structural, the nutritional, the emotional triggers that are causing in this case, the stomach to not function up to par, and then manifest as symptoms of a left-sided headache. So that's what I call fixing the stomach, is incorporating the structural, the nutritional, supplemental, emotional triggers.
A lot of people discredit emotion as having anything to do with physical health, but as you just pointed out, that emotion directly impacts whether we're in that sympathetic fight or flight response, in which case, when we're in that response, the body is shunting blood away from our core, away from our organs, and it's limiting the acid production. And what I tell people when I'm explaining the stress response, I'm like, have you ever been stressed out and either you're not hungry, or if you force yourself to eat, it's like sitting like a lump in your stomach. And some people, right, when they're under stress, they'll even throw up because their stomach, it just shuts down. It's shunting all your resources to your limbs. And we're supposed to run away from the bear, and then it's supposed to shut off. But now we're constantly triggering that stress response, and our emotions trigger it. We could be sitting safely in our home, but we start watching TV or looking on our phone or even just thinking about something stressful, and we trigger that response. And so we don't even realize we're turning our digestion off, and that wreaks havoc on the whole body.
Absolutely. And every organ has associated emotions. A lot of those come from acupuncture, thousands of years old, that correlated all of that. We talked about the stomach with oversympathetic, low self-esteem, disgust, gallbladder, which tends to relate to right-sided headaches, as those are going to be more your, liver emotions of anger, frustration, resentment. And so that's where chronic illness really becomes a challenge and becomes more chronic, if you will, because if they've got chronic stomach weakness, for example, then they're going to store more emotions in that area, in that now weak link, if you will. So then to give you kind of an example of emotions, they totally affect it. And I see every week people or new patients that have seen other chiropractors and blame, ever since I've had, I got rear-ended 20 years ago, I've got this chronic neck pain and it's just my plight, and it becomes their identity. And unfortunately, that's because nobody had addressed the emotional component. They'll get adjusted, get their chiropractic or their massage and feel good for a bit. And then when they see another red Honda, or whatever car rear-ended them, then it brings back that emotion and puts them back into that fight or flight weakness that then causes, again, the weakness of, say, the neck extensors and leaving them back into their headaches or back into their neck problems. So we want to have tools to release that. And even if it's thinking about, the accident or the first thing you remember hearing skid marks or whatever, think about that as a person gets adjusted or as they're getting their massage. I mean, people that, your listeners that are doing body work, I mean, how often do they see a person break into tears for no known, quote, known reason?
Yeah.
Right?
What do you recommend for people that recognize that a major issue is trapped, unresolved negative emotion from the past? What tools do you recommend they use to gain resolution and release those trapped emotions?
There are a lot of great tools. The tool I use clinically is an approach called neuro-emotional technique, or NET. Super well documented, proven out approach. On the One Foundation, ONE Foundation, they've done the research of pain patterns and even testing cholesterol and inflammatory markers and watching them go down by desensitizing people to the chronic effects or the physical manifestations of emotions. That's what we use clinically. On my Dr. Vrzal Instagram page, I've shown a couple videos of how I kind of apply that so that a person can clear their own emotions by touching over the pulse points on the wrists. They'll basically help a person cover every organ, and then doing a gentle flexion of the chin with the hand on the forehead. That's a way to clear emotions for you, the person, the consumer that has the emotional triggers. In other words, if you feel your blood pressure going up when your spouse says something that rubbed you the wrong way, you can do this approach by, again, touching the pulse points, putting the other hand on the forehead and doing each side of the pulse points. That clears, in general, every organ. And then there's also, tapping approaches and other approaches like that that people can use to self-desensitize to these emotional manifestations, because unfortunately the body physically stores emotions. Let's talk about the nutritional component that goes along with that, though. Is in general, my statement is you want to be more rock-like than sponge-like. And so to be more rock-like, we want to keep our minerals up. Minerals come from rocks, right? And so minerals make us more emotionally resilient to kind of have water shut off the back like a duck, right? When those emotions come along, having a good mineral reserve will help us shed those emotions and not physically store them. Whereas if we're eating things like sugar that leaches zinc, that leaches minerals, when our system's acidic, we're going to be a lot more prone to physically store those emotions. So then you're going to be more sponge-like. If you're eating the sad standard American diet that is, has a lot of processed foods and trans fats, then that person's going to be a lot more prone to store every emotion that comes down the pike, and they end up with that chronic physical illness. Whereas the person that's eating a lot of organic, and eat organic because it has thousands of times the amount of minerals in it, literally thousands of times the amount of minerals in it, and pesticides also are the toxic metals that compromise mineral status. So when we eat organic, we don't get the pesticides, we get those minerals. That's going to help us be more rock-like and resilient when the emotional stress happens, right? Think of the calmness, right, of a person that seems totally chill, even though their dad died, their mom died, that sort of stuff, or, the work goes bananas. Then that person that's eating calm and alkaline is going to handle that emotion much better. Then, the other obvious kind of trigger is exercise. Exercise allows us to raise dopamine levels. At runner's high that we get with exercise raises dopamine that tells us, hey, everything's okay. This is a good season. We're cool. And it also allows us to sort out and collect our emotions, if you will. So, I mean, I'm a crazy avid cyclist, and when I'm out on my bike, I'm listening to books, I'm listening to your podcast, things like that, to feed my mind with healthy, beneficial stuff. But it also gives me the opportunity to sort through the triggers, the stressors that have happened, and kind of categorize them, if you will, and solve them mentally. So exercise and organic vegetables are a great way to prevent the physical storage of emotions.
Oh my gosh, I love everything you said. So I have a few things to share as well. Um, I I lost my mom back in 2002, and I wanted to grieve healthfully. I was devastated by losing her. She was my best friend, and I was 22, and I didn't know how to grieve healthfully, and I really woke up to this realization that we are not given tools to process emotions healthfully, to have conflict resolution healthfully. Like, I looked back on my years of, from K through 12, right? And I grew up in Ontario. So actually, at the time, we had in high school grade 13. Can you imagine being held back and not like the entire province of Ontario for many years? We graduated when we were 19 from high school because we did, oh, it was called OAC, which was grade 13. But so for my 13 years, this is before I went to college. I was in college when my mom died, but just looking back on like the standard 13 years that kids are in, or 12 or 13 years kids are in school, and realizing that not one class, not it wasn't mandatory. It's not even known. It's so off the radar that we could be teaching children how to process emotions healthfully, how to grieve healthfully, what happens when there's loss in the family. And now they're introducing stuff like, they're introducing new things that are teaching children, but they're not teaching them real emotional life skills. They're still not teaching them how to, like, you're going to eventually lose someone, how to grieve healthfully, how to gain conflict resolution. You're going to have a fight with your friend or your spouse or a family member eventually, or a gas attendant. Like, you're going to eventually have a conflict with someone. How do you manage that? How do you do it healthfully? How do you maturely de-escalate, communicate? These are things that I had to go and find. I had to seek. So I went on this excursion, and I discovered, well, Landmark Education, which is a company I highly recommend. Now they're all online. They used to be all in person, which is cool because you can, no matter where you are in the world, you can take their live trainings. They teach amazing life skills for communication. So I took all their courses, and it helped me improve so much, my abilities to communicate and process emotions. And I just think it should be taught to everyone. And then I discovered, as a result of Landmark Education, I just discovered neuro-linguistic programming. And I went into that. I became a master practitioner and trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, but I was lucky enough to have found the creator of timeline therapy and studied under him. And timeline therapy, I have not found something that's more effective than timeline therapy at helping people to consciously have an experience of the unconscious mind, of going back to the root cause of the event, gaining resolution and releasing the emotion. So I'm excited to look into your NET because I'm always interested in, I believe that, the more tools, the better. I highly recommend you check out timeline therapy because it is phenomenal. And within 15 minutes, someone can have, I'm just saying 15 minutes arbitrarily, it could be 5, it could be 45, it depends on the person. But in one sitting, someone can go back and even the most horrific, tragic, the most, what they think they could never resolve, they can walk out of your office having 100% resolution, feeling so good about that memory, and no longer having the negative emotion when they think about that memory, but actually positively gaining these skills and these positive lessons from the memory, and that's what helps resolve. When we get a new perspective and we learn the strengths that we gained from that, the body lets go. and we no longer have the negative emotion. And that's so freeing, because holding on to anything negative when someone, especially when someone, when you perceive someone's done something to you, it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? You're hurting yourself. You're not hurting them. You're not hurting the person that hurt you. You're just hurting yourself by holding on. But we don't let go until we gain that resolution. So three systems helped me to fully heal from losing my mom. And in doing so, I was able to help clients, because that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta start. I can't believe it. Everyone needs to know this. And that's what led me down the path of working with people. And then that's when I found holistic medicine, because I was suffering physically. And I'm like, well, there's got to be more to life than just like an MD telling me to get on drugs.
Right.
And that's what led me to the podcast. But I see that what everyone needs to know is that there's a direct connection between your emotions and your physical health, and that they're not separate. And I just love that you're shedding light on that, and that sometimes headaches can even manifest because there's unresolved emotional conflict inside.
There's so much to talk about in that in that statement. I mean, for starters, the emotions associated with the lung are grief. Grief, sadness, yearning. So a lot of the stuff we go through, and I share your emotional thing. I lost my mom in January. She went into the hospital just before the holidays, just before her 79th birthday. And it was a very short 3-week challenge for her, and she was done. And so I had a lot of stress with that, but I was okay with it in the fact that I was confident that she left no strained relationships, and I was able to get to her and be there, to say goodbye and that sort of stuff. And again, taking care of myself and having these tools to get through the grieving process. Kind of tie that back to your situation. As I've kind of listened to your podcast and stuff, it sounds like the loss of your mom was right about the time you were transitioning from, in your younger years. It sounds like you grew up in a pretty healthy environment, and then started kind of going wayward, if you will, and eating more of the processed foods. So that situation was then used in your life to redirect, and now look at the tens of thousands of people that are benefiting from that change, that shift in trajectory in your life. And so that kind of brings us back to one of my favorite statements that really will help us shape the paradigm of when these stressors happen. I look at, everything happens for us and nothing happens to us, right? So if we look at these challenges, like you lost your mom, obviously it hurts. And the other statement that goes along with that is pain is intended to elicit change. Right. So if we've got the pain of loss of a loved one, loss of our mom, and our mutual experiences there, that then, I mean, for me, it just radically strained. I was already a nutcase about, changing lives. But I told my mom 25 years ago how it was going to go for her based on the diet sodas that she was living on and the lifestyle choices that she was making. They were not conducive to a healthy life. And she was following the medical model and getting her, methotrexate shots and, all the other craziness for her arthritis. And, her brain was starting to go. She totaled 3 cars in 18 months with, driving the wrong way on an on-ramp and just kind of losing it that way. I mean, fortunately, she was super adamant about not being dependent on anybody. And she went out quick and didn't, other than the 3-week stay in the hospital, it was quick for her. So having that resolution in my mind that, hey, it kind of went the way she wanted to, but there was predictive factors in there that just strengthened my resolve to be like, man, people, people that are making these choices, this is the consequence, this is the outcome. Learn from, the headache advantage, learn from where your pain is and learn to listen to that pain, because your body's telling you to make a change in your life, right? Every pain physically in the body is going to relate to an organ system that is trying to get your attention. So, every muscle has associated glands or organs, so we can use that physical pain, whether that's a, back pain that's associated with the quadratus lumborum muscle that kind of attaches from the ribs to the pelvis. That muscle spazzes out when the intestine's not happy. The thumb will get sore when the intestine's not happy. So when you have those pains, then is there a grief situation? Am I eating too much corn or wheat or dairy that's compromised the intestine? Then you do it. Maybe it's a food journal that you realize, okay, every time I eat pizza, my back hurts, or whatever that situation is. So learn from the pain that your body's trying to elicit change and with that pain. So learn from what your body's trying to tell you, so that we can change the trajectory and flourish and have the quality life that is intended.
And I want to say that the when you experience pain, that to see, even just to view it as a gift, because pain is temporary, and it's as horrible and uncomfortable as it is the largest motivator, like you said, for change. It's shining a light on something, and if you act fast enough, and find the right holistic doctor, like Dr. V, you get his book. It's coming out soon.
Right.
The Headache Advantage, right? Or is that what it's
Yes.
called? The Headache
Yes.
Advantage, right? And your
Yes.
website also is headacheadvantage.com. But by gaining this understanding, and then diving into, okay, where's this pain located? What's triggering it? Like going through and figuring out what the root cause is, make the correction quickly instead of it going deeper. Because if it's a nutrient deficiency, it only gets worse, right? If it's stress, things only get worse. And we want to
Right.
listen to pain when it first comes up, and not wait, or because the longer we prolong it, the harder it is to support the body in recovering. So catch it quickly, listen to the body. And I love that you're exposing that there's a way that we can hear the body, right? Listen to the
Right.
symptoms of the body. This is what I was taught by one of my mentors, is the body speaks in symptoms. And if we listen to those symptoms, we can catch things really early and make small corrections instead of wait to the really big problems, and then you have to make really big corrections. I've met so many people who develop cancer, and they're always surprised.
Right.
But then when they start, really going down the rabbit hole of healing, they're like, oh, there were warning signs. There were warning signs that they ignored. And I can only speak to what it is like to be a woman, but I know women ignore. I think men do too. Not everyone,
Right.
but there's women ignore because they put everyone else first. They're like, oh, I don't have enough time for this. I'm taking care of my husband. I'm taking care of my kids. I got to drive them to soccer. I've got to cook dinner. I've got to clean. I just came home from work. Like, I get it. You have taken on the responsibility of other people. Like, you are the executive function of an entire household of people, right? But if you stop functioning, everything grinds to a halt. So you really do need to prioritize you. Listen to those symptoms. If your body is crying out, it's time to press the pause button, ask for some help from friends or family members to take over some of your tasks, so that you can carve out the time that's needed to take care of you. You had mentioned nutrient deficiency, and I think that's really important to bring up the minerals. In fact, I have two interviews. One, Kristen Bowen, episode all the way back in 294, and episode with Dr. Joel Wallach, one of my mentors, who's absolutely amazing, episode 435. With Kristen Bowen, she sells a magnesium soak where you absorb grams of magnesium from it. It is phenomenal. 76% of people reach full cell saturation within a month of soaking daily in this magnesium soak. And she offers listeners a discount. You can go to her website's really cute, livingthegoodlifenaturally.com, and use
Nice.
coupon code LTH, as in Learn True Health. Use coupon code LTH to get the listener discount. She gives us a great discount. Get the magnesium soak. Do it every day. Just get a basin. Just put your feet in it. When you're watching TV, reading a book, even when you're at your desk, just put your feet in it and soak every day for 30 days. Within the first day, you'll notice a difference. Most people have amazingly deep sleep and then such great energy. And one of the things I learned from her, and I've learned many things, she's come back on the show about 4 times, so you can listen to her, all the episodes I did with Kristen Bowen. But she said that if we are magnesium deficient, pain receptors cannot turn off. that we need magnesium for the pain receptors to even close. And I had pain in my foot the other day. I was like, I know what I got to do. Did a foot soak. Immediately the pain resolved. I was like, this is so cool. Magnesium is so cool. And it's the most needed of all the minerals. There's 60 minerals the body needs, but it's the most needed. We always think calcium is the most important. It's not. It's not. Magnesium and zinc are more important than calcium in terms of how many enzymatic processes are used. The body needs magnesium to make over 300 hormones and proteins and 1,800 enzymatic processes. Like it's crazy, and people are walking around completely deficient in minerals, especially in magnesium, because of the farming practices of over the last 100 years have depleted our food supply of minerals. So like I love that you're stressing eat organic, find farms, if you can find a local farm that does biodynamic farming that remineralizes their soil, that also is so helpful. And then Dr. Joel Wallach has amazing books that'll blow your mind on utilizing minerals to support the body's ability to heal itself. And that was episode 435. So I love that you brought that up, because when we're deficient in one of the 90 essential nutrients, the body just starts to break down. And like I describe this to my clients, it's like the workmen showed up to build the house, but the lumber didn't get delivered. Like your body wants to heal itself, but if the lumber doesn't show up, like your job is to deliver the lumber. Your body are the workmen. Like they want to rebuild. They want to build healthy cells. If you don't deliver the lumber, they're not rebuilding healthy cells, and you begin to break down. And then pain.
Right. I agree 100%. You called out the two primary mineral deficiencies. You talked a lot about, magnesium is so calming. I often have people doing, like that soak or taking a magnesium supplement at bedtime, so that'll help colon function and the calmness, as you so eloquently described. But then zinc that you mentioned, but I mean, we also need to talk about that, our soils are depleted in zinc. Sugar leaches zinc, stress leaches zinc. Zinc helps us break down that stress hormone. It helps us make stomach acid. I alluded to that earlier. Helps us, make and break down most of the estrogens, most of the hormones, and it's prolific in the immune system. I mean, with the whole, viral challenge that we went through over these last few years, zinc got a lot of press. Fortunately, people are starting to recognize that, hey, zinc deficiency is real. I mean, so a physical symptom of zinc deficiency is the white clouds in the fingernails. So those listeners who look at your fingernails, if you have the white clouds, it takes 2 months to grow out from cuticle to tip. So if you were sick or super stressed or eating too much sugar 2 months ago, you'll have a white cloud near the cuticle of one or multiple fingernails. That's a sign that you've got really significant zinc deficiency. So we want to load up on good quality forms of zinc made from organic vegetables, obviously, and pumpkin seeds are a simple solution. Pumpkin seeds are beneficial for most blood types. There's a whole nother discussion, but pumpkin seeds are great for A blood types and O blood types, which is 84% of the population. They're great for the prostate, gentlemen. So, I mean, pumpkin seeds is an easy snack to kind of start bringing that zinc level back up. But most people need to supplement because it's so profoundly deficient in current living.
That's if the pumpkins were grown in zinc-rich soil. Like I like
Great
to
point.
tell people, like when you think of spinach, like we think of Popeye, right? Popeye the Sailor Man, and he ate his spinach. What nutrient do you think of? What like element do you think of when you think of spinach?
Yep, iron,
Right,
folic
iron.
acid. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And folic acid can be, or folate, we should say, right?
Right, yes,
can
yes.
be there. Folic acid is not in nature, but we think of iron. But most spinach is grown in hydroponically, and so there's actually zero minerals, like almost zero. I don't know if you noticed if you're an older, right? If you consider yourself a seasoned person on this planet, I'm not going to put an age out there, but there are people who are old enough to remember what a carrot and a tomato tasted like, that they taste like carrot, and now they taste like cardboard. And
Yeah.
you have to go back in your memory when you were a kid. Do you remember biting into something and being like, I could sit here and eat carrots all day. I go to a local farm and I get them like fresh out of the ground and they taste like back when the 80s, like when carrots taste
Right.
like carrots.
Right.
But
And
most
sweet.
food, right? Oh no, they're candy. You could I just
Yeah.
sit there and I eat them raw like candy. I just can't stop. It's so delicious. It's so good for you.
Right.
So if your produce tastes like cardboard, guess what? Probably no minerals in it. I'm just gonna
Right.
say if it's grown in minerally rich soil, you want to become a raw vegan. You can't get enough. It's so good. It tastes so good. You just want to eat it raw, right out of the ground. So I love pumpkin seeds for many reasons. They're also anti-parasitic, and they're a really good source of protein and really good source of healthy fats. But whether there's going to be enough zinc in them, I don't know. It just depends on whether that soil even has zinc in the first place. Because plants can grow; all they need is NPK. So plants can grow without the most of the minerals, but you can't as a human. We need 60 minerals. Plants don't need them to grow produce. But if they do have them, because I have grown a vegetable garden with I remineralized the soil, and it's like the Garden of Eden. These things grow like I poured steroids into the ground. They grow beautifully. There's different kinds of zinc. There's the picolate. There's I'm gonna like totally butcher this. The bisglycinate.
Yes.
What do you recommend as the best type of zinc if someone were to buy a zinc supplement?
Yeah, I use whole food based supplements that are basically going to be, if you will, organic pumpkin seeds vacuum dried into a zinc supplement. So it's more as it would be found in your former garden.
Got it. So
So that's
digested by the plant. So it's plant derived and
right.
digested by the plant. But the company that you sell, do they test to make sure that there's actually zinc in the pumpkin seed?
Absolutely. I mean, it's
Yeah.
may not be pumpkin seed. They're using high zinc vegetables that they grow in their own organic farm to produce the supplements that I typically would recommend for zinc. Mhm.
Got it. So you can't say exactly what kind of zinc because it's the kind that comes out of the ground. So
Right.
it's not like picolate or any
Right.
of those. Okay.
Right, because those are more, I hate to say it, but call it lab grown almost, if you will,
Right. Yeah.
bound, right? And so taking a zinc like that, we're going to want to balance it with the copper and the magnesium,
Mm-hmm.
chromium that all helps it synergistically function. So that's part of why I prefer supplements that come from the organic farm ultimately, because it's going to digest better. It's going to not create other deficiencies. If we over consume, say zinc, in a synthetic form, it can create deficiencies of other nutrients. Vitamin E is a great example of that. Vitamin E is found in walnuts and organic nuts and that stuff. But if we extract it out and do a alpha d-alpha tocopherol, then it creates a functional E deficiency, and then that person's going to have back pain or potentially cardiovascular weakness from creating a functional deficiency by not having the selenium and other synergistic nutrients that go along with E in that case, or zinc as we described.
Mm-hmm. So we've touched on some important subjects. Your environment that you live in can play a role, like mold, for example. There's also EMF exposure. I have several episodes about that. So there's environmental, there's emotional, there's whether the food you're eating can play a role, the nutrient deficiency can play a role. So there's these different layers. When someone comes to you and you've talked about this, that they come to you and the first thing is, well, where's the headache, right? So we talked
Right.
about the left side. Let's talk about the right side. If someone comes in and they have headaches always on the right side, what is that an indicator of?
So the gallbladder is a right-sided organ, and similarly to the stomach meridian, but the gallbladder starts right behind the eye, where kind of the V, if you will, on the outside of the eye, goes down the right side of the head. It goes down both sides, but again, the gallbladder is a right-sided organ. So when the gallbladder doesn't function, when it's congested, or if emotionally, we talked about anger, frustration, resentment, if that's been stuffed away, compromising the way the gallbladder functions, then that's going to set the stage for a right-sided headache. Physically, the muscle that supports the back of the knee, it's called, there's a little tiny muscle called the popliteus muscle, that gets weak and tender and creates instability in the knee when the gallbladder simultaneously is compromised. So these are other areas that would physically manifest, if you will, when the gallbladder is not functioning properly. So then we want to look at food triggers, potentially glyphosate. I mean, here comes a whole nother episode, right? But glyphosate inhibits bile production, and so then they end up with bile stasis or congestion. That is a very common trigger to set up right-sided gallbladder headaches. Glyphosate is the toxin within Roundup that is used to kill wheat, the crops of wheat, corn, soy, oats right before harvest, so that they can harvest it all at the same time. It all comes back to the manufacturing processes. But that inhibits bile production. That also obliterates the intestinal lining. So that is the most common trigger I see to set up right-sided headaches. Certainly then we've got the balance of omega-3s to omega-6 fatty acids. There's some ratio in there that, typical SAD, standard American diet, tends to have more omega-6s as opposed to the omega-3s that the body really needs for anti-inflammatory. Omega-6s are good, nuts and seeds, we need them, but most diets have too much of those, and so that inverse ratio can also congest the gallbladder, which then leads to constipation and other things that go along with poor fat metabolism, even nutrient-wise. B6, pyridoxal 5-phosphates, the active form, functional form of B6, that also helps facilitate methylation again, where a lot of the bile is made, and facilitates the functioning of the bile. If a person's had chronic gallbladder problems, and they've had their gallbladder removed, typically we want to replace that bile. My canned joke is until the gallbladder grows back. So.
Yeah, and so the rest of their lives. And
Yes.
when I have a client and they start telling me about certain issues that sound like a fat deficiency, like a healthy fat deficiency, I'm like, do you still have your gallbladder? And almost always they say no. And then
Right.
I'm like, okay, so we need to back this up. Your gallbladder was so important. Like, God gave you a gallbladder for a reason, that it would store all the bile, and then when you ate the fat in your food was not able to, it's not water soluble fat, like you see oil kind of floating on top of water, right? It's
Right.
not mixing together. And even though your stomach would produce like the enzymes to break down the lipase, to break down the lipids, to break down the fat in your food, whether you're vegan, there's even fat in apples and potatoes. So it's in small amounts and it's different kind of fat. But there's fat in plants, there's fat obviously in animal products. But regardless of what you're eating, there's going to be some amount of fat. And that fat is important for the body. There's good kind, like you said, pumpkin seeds, great. And then there's bad kind. Anything fried, not good for you, right? So fried,
Right.
bad. Just giving you an example, there's a big spectrum of fats that are, not really helpful, and then fats that are extremely unhealthy and very damaging. And then there's fats that are super healthy for you. But if you can't digest them because they're not water soluble. So the stomach then empties the small intestine. The bile is supposed to then empty out. The gallbladder is supposed to squeeze and let all that bile mix with the contents, the liquid contents now of what you just ate. And it emulsifies, sort of like soap does. It allows it to then the digestive enzymes that break down fat, allows them to then blend with the fat. So if that process doesn't happen, no matter how much fat you eat, you're not able to, you're digesting like 1/100th of, I don't know, because the
Right.
liver is just dripping, just drip, 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 instead of squeezing, a tablespoon or an ounce or whatever it was, however much bile it was squeezing into the contents. It's doing such a small amount of bile now that you're barely able to digest. And here's the kicker. What I've learned from naturopaths is that usually a bile problem was already a healthy fat deficiency to begin with, because we need healthy cholesterol to
Yes.
make healthy bile, and buildup of gallstones is a lack of healthy cholesterol. And what I've seen naturopaths do is actually help the body slowly increase through supporting the digestion, in healthfully increase the healthy cholesterol production, which then breaks down the gallbladder, the gallstones in the gallbladder, and then that restores function. So if you can catch this early enough, this is again where the pain it matters. If you start to have little aches and pains, or I ate a fried egg and then I get a little gallbladder attack, like it's small. If it's
Right.
small, you run to a naturopath. You run to an amazing chiropractor with an extensive knowledge, such as yourself, right? We run and we do what we can to support saving the gallbladder, because if once you've had it removed, you need to be on, and your surgeon will not tell you, which is a crime. Every surgeon who's ever removed a gallbladder that doesn't tell their patient that they need to support their body with basically exogenous, someone else's bile, right? Like a ox
Right.
bile or whatever. Like, or sometimes people get, I think like there's like papaya enzymes or something, but I haven't seen that work as well. I don't know. I'd like to
No.
hear your feedback on that. But basically, you have to take it exogenously. You have to take it from outside your body instead of your body making it for the rest of your life, because that was removed. And MD medicine does not tell you that, because, and I really do think it's on purpose. I don't think the surgeon's doing it on purpose, but I think the whole system, the education system, is designed to not have the surgeon tell them, and then they go home and get sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker, and get on more drugs and more drugs and more drugs and more drugs, and just more hospital stays, and they become a cash cow
Right.
for the mainstream medical system, which I'm on my soapbox again, raving about how angry I am that this system is designed to keep you sick and make your loved ones suffer, when it's needless and it doesn't have to be that way. So when you have a client come in, they've got right-sided headaches and you're beginning to detect gallbladder problems, you're there quickly to help them make some nutritional changes, make some dietary changes to get that back on track. But when someone comes to you and they no longer have their gallbladder, what kind of supplementation have you seen works best?
Yes. So replacing the bile salts, so they no longer have the storage mechanism of the bile. And so typically I have a person taking 1 to 2 a night of I use a product called Colacal, but something that, or we have several others as well, that physically contain bile salts. And unfortunately, people have probably know the taste of bile salts when they've drank too much and threw up. That's bile actually that they're tasting. So we need to replace those because it's not being stored. Typically, bile is recycled from, reabsorbed back up through the intestine into the liver and recycled. Part of the mechanism with bile is that it's taking the toxin. The liver takes the toxins that it's taking out of the bloodstream, puts it into the bile to then eject into the colon to get rid of when we eat good fats. So that's another mechanism that we need to consider, that those toxins are potentially part of the reason that the gallbladder is congested. Another mechanism that takes place is as that bile squirts down the bile duct, there's actually a release of eosinophils, an immune modulator that helps, kind of antibacterial, if you will. So that also is, I kept finding that, gallbladder was helping people's immune systems. Like, well, how's this work? And Dr. Goodhart, the founder of applied kinesiology, often talked about bile being the most dense antioxidant available. And so there's that benefit of antioxidants that also facilitate the immune system. So we've got all these little interplays that go in the body that is just so profound and exciting as we start learning these mechanisms and how they all
Right?
interplay.
I,
Right.
I geek out. I'm so excited. It's so interesting. I had a guy on my show a few years ago. I've had him on a few times, and he's a really interesting fellow. He's actually like he was an acupuncturist who became a high school teacher. So he doesn't have like a ton of money, but he has invested about, I think, $40,000 of his own money into lab tests that he does on himself before and after 30-day fasts. And every year he does during the summer, because he's a teacher, so he can take the summer off. He does a 30-day fast, and he's really trained in fast. He's been doing it for a long time. I don't recommend someone jump into a 30-day fast if they've never fasted before. Listen to episode 230 to learn more about fasting and how to do it healthfully. Dr. Alan Goldhammer is an amazing guest on episode 230. So what this guy does is he tests for, this is why it costs so much money. He tests for the things that are not normally tested for. He tests for obesogens and forever chemicals like microplastics, all the things, and glyphosate, all the pesticides, like everything that is incredibly harmful that has been, we've been wondering how can we get this out of our body? How can we detox this? Because it just is stored in our fat. And he is not he's not an overweight person to begin with. He doesn't have a lot, but even people who are skinny still have fat, and their body is trying to store all these chemicals. So he would do this every year, and he would experiment. So one year he just did fasting, and then he puts it up on his website just so people can see. And then the next year he incorporated like sauna in some supplements, and then he put those results up. And the time that he has had the single-handedly the best result with permanently removing and lowering the needle, permanently removing all across the board, all these very harmful man-made chemicals that get stored up in our body that cause cancer and epigenetically change our gene expressions for like really nasty stuff, is when he added a binder. And it was explained to him by, I can't remember, some PhD guy goes, bile. So the bile we've been talking about, bile is, wonderful thing that digests our fat. Like you've said, wonderful antioxidant, has so many properties. It is also the mechanism in which the liver uses to remove all these chemicals from the body. Right. But bile is so precious, it gets reabsorbed in the intestines. Most of it gets reabsorbed. Now, our body thinks that we're living in the Garden of Eden, right? We're eating super clean. There are no such thing as chemicals, right? And so if that were the case, if you were never exposed to these chemicals, bile most of it would get reabsorbed, and then through the fiber that you're eating, some of those toxins get out, right? But because we pretty much everyone, unless there are listeners, right? Everyone eats crap. Everyone eats 15 grams or less of fiber. Everyone's constipated, right? People are reabsorbing the forever chemicals right back up into their body, and also the estrogens. The estrogens are broken down and then reabsorbed because people are constipated and they don't eat enough fiber. They don't eat enough binders. So during his 30-day fast, he took binders. So that with the bile, which your liver's always going to, even if you're not eating, the liver's going to still have to get rid of stuff. So it's still, pumping bile out. And he took binders, and it lowered significantly all of the, across the board, all of these chemicals, which just goes to show how, bile is very important. Digestion's super important. If you're constipated, you are reabsorbing toxins. Right? And fiber is so important because it's helping get rid of those toxins from the liver all the way out of your body without being reabsorbed. And I thought that was fascinating, because we don't think about, how do we get rid of this? We're eating glyphosate. Even if you go out once a month and you eat some kind of fast food or restaurant food, you're eating tons of man-made chemicals. Even if you eat clean most of the time, and then some of the time you go eat from a restaurant, you are absorbing these chemicals. And so that it's so important to consider, like, we've got to help the body get it all the way out of the body.
Absolutely. It's
wild.
It's such an intricate mechanism, and I mean, reminds me of a gal that I actually evaluated, up on stage and at a seminar I was teaching, and then she kind of hit me up a year later that she was about to have her gallbladder removed. And, yes, and this is a health practitioner. This is a qualified natural doctor. And, she tried everything else and was trying to figure out what was going on. And so, ran a quick evaluation. It turned out her ovary was dysfunctional. And so the body was overproducing cholesterol to compensate for the hormonal problems and the hormonal deficiencies. So we put her on a supplement to rebuild that ovary, and her cholesterol stabilized, her gallbladder corrected. And, I kind of wondered what happened with this gal, because I hadn't had follow up with her again. And then she she came up on my Facebook page, where she, hit me up and did this whole testimony about how we saved her gallbladder and her hormones corrected and so on. So kind of to bring it back to the cholesterol we were talking about a minute ago, a couple of things that are often missed as far as triggers for high cholesterol is hormonal deficiencies, because that cholesterol is the building blocks for most of those hormones, including the stress hormones and, the girl hormones, right? And so if those are deficient in the body, then the liver is going to overproduce cholesterol as a compensation to correct them. So it's not so much that it's plaquing up the arteries or those things that most of us have been led to believe. It's the deficiency of hormones that the body's trying to compensate for. And so hypothyroid, low thyroid, is another very common trigger for the body to overproduce cholesterol as a compensatory mechanism to try and, find homeostasis when things are out of balance.
Yeah, cholesterol is really important. Most people have taken on the mainstream just because, listen, we need to question everything. We've been taught cholesterol is bad, it causes heart disease. I'm not going to, because I want to hear from you, the guest, but I could talk for at least an hour on how that is such a sham, such a lie. Cholesterol is 70% of the white matter of the brain is made of cholesterol.
Right.
Every cell in your body that has nucleus makes cholesterol, not just the liver. The liver only makes about 30%. It is such an important nutrient for your body that like every cell wall is made of cholesterol. Like you said, sex and stress hormones are made of cholesterol. The myelin sheath of the nerves that protect the nerves are made of cholesterol. So it's so vastly important. And also bile is made of cholesterol, right? To emulsify fats so we can absorb them. So many reasons why we need it. And just like any nutrient, too much, not good. Too little, not good, right? Goldilocks, right? We need to have that Goldilocks.
Perfect bottle of boiled porridge.
Yeah, we got to have that Goldilocks for every nutrient in the body. And we're kind of running around like stressed out, I don't know, just like whatever animal you could think of. We're just running around like very animalistic, being stressed out and kind of like ignoring our body, and then self-medicating, right? With either over-the-counter pain meds, coffee, alcohol, sugar. I was just talking to a woman yesterday. She wanted an example of how a very simple change can make a profound difference. I said, I'm going to take water. Everyone ignores the importance of water. If you drink 5% less water than your body needs, you have a 25% reduction in your energy production. In ATP, cellular energy production goes down, and then you're tired. So what do you do? And you probably have headaches. So what do you do? You pop some Tylenol or Advil, and then you drink some coffee. Well, you dehydrate yourself further. And then you have another slump. So you eat some sugar, or maybe go for some sugary frappuccino, right? And then you're completely tired, wired, super stressed out, cortisol through the roof. So you drink alcohol at night because it's socially acceptable way to quote unquote calm down. Now you're in a vicious cycle every day of doing tasks that dehydrate you. Sugar, alcohol, caffeine, sugar, alcohol, caffeine every single day. You're setting yourself up for exhaustion, burnout, poor sleep, tired, wired. And then you're stressed out. So then you lose your capacity to handle stress. So you start snapping at people, but you don't realize you're the problem. So you think everyone else is, a jerk. And then you're affecting your hormones and your digestion, and your hair starts falling out. Like just, every single aspect of this in the mainstream is acceptable, right? Go get over-the-counter meds to medicate, self-medicate. Go do sugar, alcohol, caffeine to self-medicate. If we just got off that bandwagon and started drinking enough water, we could all those things would be thrown away, and we'd have great skin, great sleep, great energy.
Right.
Our joints would stop aching. So that's a simple one change, right? And I know you teach us hundreds of things. One change, one little change can change your life. And that takes calming down, taking some breaths, calming down, and starting to listen to the body, connect in, and ask, what does my body need? What is my body asking for? Okay, so we talked about left-sided headaches, right-sided headaches. What if the headaches are like on both sides, like right in front of the eyes or behind the eyes, I should say?
Great question. If you allow me, I'd like to go back just on the, to finish up the conclusion
Yeah,
or conclude the discussion on cholesterol.
yeah.
If people are listening to this and they're truly concerned about cardiovascular risk, a much better thing to look at is going to be homocysteine. High homocysteine, that's an inflammatory marker that can be tested in lab tests. Homocysteine is something that should be recycled and broken down, kind of like we're talking about with bile, but it should be broken down. It breaks down in two pathways in the liver called methylation and sulfation, two key pathways that are often compromised in people. So physically, if you're concerned about cardiovascular risk, when homocysteine is high or elevated, physically on the body, it's going to manifest as the little red petechia, or they're called cherry angiomas. So if it looks like, somebody took a red felt pen and polka dotted, here and there, or you see those starting to manifest on the body, they may even be as profound as a, mole size or raised red dot. That is it's not a cancer risk per se. I mean, your dermatologist is not going to say, oh, we need to remove this, but that is a sign that your body's overproducing homocysteine, and that is way more directly related to cardiovascular risk. And so when homocysteine levels are up above 995, the higher that is, the more relevant, the more risk there is for cardiovascular disease, and the more likely it is to be a fatal event. So if you're, truly concerned, or you've got the family history of, cardiovascular challenges, look at your homocysteine. It's so much more directly related to risk than cholesterol is. Cholesterol is a 50%, or, half the people with high cholesterol, don't have any cardiovascular problems. Half that have low cholesterol still have cardiovascular problems. So homocysteine is almost a guarantee based on that number of what the risk is. And it's very modifiable. The reason we don't see it, we'll just call it the big pharma world, is because it's nutrients like B6 and B12 that help break that homocysteine down to reduce the potential of plaquing. Those red dots, the petechia, the cherry angiomas, those are indicators that you're setting the stage for plaquing in the arteries, and that's way more relevant to what the risk is going to be long term for cardiovascular problems. So just to kind of give the listener to know something else to look for to have that long term quality of life. And now to take it back to your question, that the bitemporal headache, if they've got pain on both sides, that is a hormonal issue. So that typically is, most of the time, tends to have to do with estrogen metabolism. So again, we go back to some of those liver pathways like methylation, like sulfation. There's another pathway called P450. Sorry to use terms like that, but these are key pathways in the liver that break down estrogen when we're done with it. And so if one of those pathways in the liver isn't functioning properly, then the person doesn't break down estrogen, then they're going to be a lot more prone to cancers, and to these other, hormonal swings and high cholesterol and temporal headaches. The muscle that physically will get weak and tender when estrogen metabolism is compromised, or in other words, the ovary is not functioning properly, then it's called the gluteus medius. It's kind of the top of the butt region. That muscle will get weak when the ovary, or in the male, the gonads are not functioning properly, and so that'll affect the way they walk, in kind of a shuffle, if you will, the lateral list during their walk. There's an acupuncture point right on the outside of the elbow that's going to get very tender. Think tennis elbow. That is a sign that hormonal regulation is out of balance, and so we want to look at mechanisms to break down estrogen more appropriately. Nutritionally, it might be that corn, we mentioned corn earlier in the podcast, that corn is a massive trigger for ovarian cysts and will literally create damage in the ovary. Sorry, this might rub some people, but from a blood type perspective, blood type females that are drinking coffee, another massive trigger for ovarian dysregulation, and setting the stage for some big bigger problems to come. So coffee's fine for other blood types for the most part, but corn and coffee are the most common triggers I see to set the stage for this bitemporal headache showing up on both sides.
Oh my goodness. That kind of just blows my mind. Going back to what you said about homocysteine, like just we gotta go a little bit deeper there. Uh what nutrients would be good to make sure that we're getting? So I know like folate, B12, what's really important to help the body to, is it break down homocysteine or just lower the production of it? What are we supporting
Right.
to get it lower? What causes it? What's the most common cause to be high? Like just walk us through this, since you kind of presented us with this, like, hey, the most important thing to look at for
Truth
heart
bomb.
health, right? It's this little truth bomb. Yeah. Yeah, let's unpack that truth bomb.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you kind of laid the stage with, talk about, we call it energy drinks, sodas, things like that are going to leach alcohol. Some of the, hangover, if you will, is the functional deficiency of B6. Pyridoxal 5-phosphate is the active form of B6 that drives the methylation and sulfation pathways. So again, homocysteine is something that should be recycled through the body. And so when the pathways, these two pathways in the liver that don't function properly, when they don't break it down, then it continues to elevate. And that's where the plaquing, the big risk comes from. So if we're doing things again like sodas or sugars that leach the B vitamins, zinc is another nutrient that helps drive these pathways. Methionine, the best sources of methionine are beef, tuna, and eggs. So if we're eating beef, tuna, and eggs, then that we have the methionine amino acid to facilitate that methylation pathway to then break down this homocysteine, to break down the estrogens, so that we're less prone to have this significant cardiovascular risk.
Do you happen to know any vegan sources just for those listeners who don't
Great.
eat those animal products?
That is a great question, and I run into that often. Unfortunately, it's only found in those foods as far as I know. So often, I mean, my favorite example of this is a third generation hardcore vegan that unfortunately had MS and was in a wheelchair and was unable to walk. She had ulcerations all up, on her feet and shins and everything. What we had to do for her was give her a methionine supplement to offset that significant methionine deficiency, and she was an O blood type. So, I mean, from a blood type perspective, an A blood type will do much better that way. An O blood type is more dependent on the methionine, again, because it's beef, and that's a big need, if you will, in the O blood type for that detoxification process. So often it ends up being taking an amino acid supplement that has that methionine in it if it's a vegan.
Got it. I think it's really important to recognize that food is medicine. We should be using it as medicine. And the body goes through seasons. I've had a few interviews where the doctors talk about how they'll use a very clean vegan diet. Listen, Oreos are vegan. I'm not saying like all vegans healthy, right? But
Right.
I like to call it a whole food plant-based diet, where whole food meaning it's single ingredient. Like there's broccoli. Like you can recognize everything on your plate. There's no chemicals. There's no weird stuff. You could actually pronounce every single ingredient that's on your plate, and
Right.
it came from a farm, not a manufacturing facility, right?
Lab.
So a whole, like a lab, yeah, no lab grown stuff. So whole food, plant based, very nutrient dense, lots of good fiber. Like there's a lot of benefits to a whole food, plant based, and a mix of raw and cooked, for those variety of the enzymes and the different types of fiber, because when you cook something it changes the fiber, so you're feeding a different gut bacteria. So there's lots of fun stuff that you can play with. And what I've heard from several doctors is they use it like a cleanse, like a season. So you might do this for a few months, few weeks, few months, few years. And then there's a time where some people require animal products, right? Or you could, like you said, find it from a supplement. But if we're using food as medicine and we're being pragmatic, not dogmatic,
Hmm.
around diet, but pragmatic. I want to give my body exactly what it needs. And a lot of people just run around and shove the food in their mouth that tastes the best, right? If you're allowing your taste buds and your dopamine response to guide your diet, you're going to end up like a statistic. So we have to be more calculated. Like you wouldn't just put any fluid into your gas tank. Why are you doing that to your body? Sorry to give you a little like shame session there, but not calling anyone out in particular, but just like do a little internal check and go, because I do this to myself every day. What do I feel like for dinner? Wait a second. It's not about like feel like what's fun. It's what was my body asking for. Sometimes it's a big smoothie. Sometimes sometimes it's a big salad. Sometimes it's something else, right? But like listening to my body and going, what is my body asking me for? What nutrients should I be giving my body? So I'm not saying that everyone should be vegan or everyone should eat meat. I'm not dogmatic when it comes to diet, but a lot of people haven't explored the healing benefits of a whole food plant-based diet, or as Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Joel Furman will point out, eat mostly plants, right? Like just nutritarian
Right.
style. Eat mostly plants, eat a variety, and if anything, treat animal products like a condiment rather than the main event. And so many people gain such benefits from that. But thank you for pointing out that, like, yes, we don't see multiple generation vegans if they're not being smart about their nutrients. We don't see them have great outcomes. But you know what? We also don't see Americans in the South that eat fried food for multiple generations have good outcomes either. So,
Right.
it goes both ways. We have to be cautious about how we cook our food, what we cook our food in, whether it's like nonstick Teflon or plastic, right? In the microwave. Like that matters too. And again, I'm on my soapbox raving
Bring
about
it.
how it's kind of like once you wake up to this, it's like everything's trying to kill me, like
Feels
everything's
that way.
dangerous. My friend woke up she just like literally woke up when she was in a grocery store reading packages and she had that aha moment. She's like texted me angrily. She's like, how do you do this? Everything's dangerous. Like everything's killing us. How do you do it? How do you not angry every time you go into a grocery store? And it's liberating when you learn what's healthy for you and what your body needs. I am super excited for what we're learning from you. Like I have to have you back on the show because you're you're a true holistic doctor. And
Thank
I've
you.
had a string of interviews where they claim to be holistic and then they talk about, well, you could get this drug. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Or they're treating supplements like it's a drug.
Right.
And there's a big difference in the philosophical lens that you view the body. I can clearly hear that you view that the body, like we have a God-given ability to heal, that our body is constantly wanting to heal, and that you're like, let's make sure we're delivering the lumber, right? And then also getting out of our own way. Stop feeding it what hurts it. Stop putting us in an environment that hurts it. Do the responsible thing of cleaning up the emotions, right? And lowering the stress, making those
Right.
lifestyle changes, and then delivering to the body the nutrients it does need in within the Goldilocks zone, and
Right.
also doing the right labs just to check in. But
Right.
you know what? You could probably listen to the language of the symptoms, like the language of the body speaking. Like you said, if you start to have those little red dots on you, or those little
Hmm.
things that look like freckles or look like moles, but they're red, hey, that's high homocysteine. Like your head, that's early warning signs of heart disease, right? Let's
Right.
catch it when it's a whisper. Let's catch it when it's that first pain before, it's the big nasty, right?
Right. Can I add
So
a little thing to kind of follow what you're
yeah.
saying? The zinc deficiency is one of the symptoms of zinc deficiency is lack of smell or taste. A lot of people had
Mm-hmm.
that during the virus we just went through. So the person that eats the sugar, for example, and then ends up zinc deficient, they need more sugar to offset to give flavor to their food. Whereas the person like us, that's eating a plant-based diet and getting proper zinc levels, that food, the organic vegetables, are actually going to taste good and taste better to us. So the child, for example, that is eating, the mom's allowing them to eat crackers and sugar and junk for food, they're going to be zinc deficient. And so those plants are not going to taste good to them. So one of my solutions, moms, is to give a child, we carry a couple different forms of liquid zinc to then start getting that child's zinc levels up. Their immune system's going to function better. They're going to handle stress better, and their palate's going to expand, and they're going to start actually appreciating those good, healthy foods that, Ashley, like you consumed when you were in your youth, that your mom was feeding you. Those are foods that are going to flourish and thrive and build health. Similarly, adults, if we're eating trans fats and a lot of fried type foods, the liver being stressed out will actually crave more of that, and it creates that whole conundrum, that vicious cycle of pursuing the things that are making a person more and more unhealthy. And that's how that vicious cycle goes, where a person just starts going downhill because they get so far disconnected, if you will, from their body, that they start craving the things that are making them worse. So that's part of our job, if you will, as clinicians, is to help break that cycle, get them eating the healthier foods, and kind of suck it up, if you will, initially to eat the healthier foods, and start redeveloping that taste for the things that are going to allow us to flourish, and instead of taking us down that ugly, terrible quality of life road that can ensue.
So we just discussed we just touched the surface. We just discussed a few different headaches. So we didn't even go into what if it's the back of the occiput? What if it's, there's so many different types of headaches. We didn't even really get into migraines. I want to definitely have you back on the show. It would be so cool. Now you've got a book coming out. You got a website for people to check out. Let's talk a bit about how do my listeners who want to stop suffering, how do they connect with you?
Thank you. Last name is Vrzal, Vrzal. I post things on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Periodically, little 1 minute quippy, fun triggers about this type of stuff that we've discussed today. And certainly the most beneficial aspect or an area is headacheadvantage.com, headacheadvantage.com. On that site, it's neo, it's young, but on that site there are links to the 7 different patterns of headaches, and you can click on that link and it'll list out some of the food triggers or some of the potential supplements that you can take to in each of those patterns. I put kind of a little Q&A, if you will, to help direct to what the most likely best supplement would be to solve those headache problems. So that's there, and then when you put your email on there, then I can let you know when the book is officially available, which is at the timing of this recording, about a month away.
Yeah, I'm going to be publishing this today. So in about a month, your book's going to come out, which is really exciting. And it's going to be called Headache Advantage. So we're going to be able to see it then. Now, you have something called How to Handle Stress Better. Tell us a bit about that. Is that like do we sign up for your email and get it, or is that just on your website?
So you'll get a little, that's one of the chapters. The frontal headaches typically has to do with chronic cortisol production, if you will, or so either the body's not breaking that cortisol down properly, which open up another Pandora's box, but often things like Lyme disease can then compromise the body's ability to break down that stress hormone and set the stage for a frontal headache. So what a person would get when they enter their email is a link to that chapter going into how to modulate that stress response a little more healthfully.
Oh, cool. You know what? I personally have some people I'm going to be sending to you. The second we get off of this recording, I know my listeners, I bet you guys are thinking of some friends, some family, some coworkers, or hey, my cousin's mom, everyone knows someone who has headaches. Now, do you also work with people that have chronic pain in other areas of their body? Or do you just specialize in headaches?
Chronic pain, the body tells a story, and the reason I focused the book on headaches is when I started out trying to write a book that covered the whole body, but it was way too all-encompassing, ominous, if you will. and the book would never be done because I'm learning every day. So, when I kind of realized I got into healthcare because of my own headaches, unfortunately, about 50% of the population suffers with headaches. And when I did the research, unfortunately, no one is talking about headaches in this regard. And we mentioned migraines. For me, migraine ultimately, as far as everything I've seen in the literature, migraine ultimately just means it's debilitating, or it's gnarly, if you will. It all comes down to the location. So, I mean, my original title for the book was Headaches, Location, 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 because location is everything. So where the position on the head that the pain is, that tells us the story of what the trigger is. But yes, that relates to head, then there's all these other physical manifestations in the body or on the body, in the body, that are going to also relate to that same area. So that's how things, like L5, the central low back pain goes along with that frontal headache, overzealous stress response we talked about, knee pain, weakness in the inside of the knee, or ankle weakness, plantar fasciitis, or bunions. Those are all signs of chronic cortisol secretion. So we can pull all that together. So I guess that's the long answer of, yes, I deal with, chronic illness, the whole body. I got into healthcare because I'm a fitness junkie. That's how I lab test everything, is on myself, if you will. But by default, I mean, chronically ill people are talking to chronically ill people and talking about what's going on. So that's our niche, if you will, is helping those people that need it so desperately.
Can you be my new best friend?
I love it. I'd be honored.
Speaking my language. Yes. Okay, I've got one for you. I recently, a month ago, started doing 2 workouts a day, and I guess maybe I didn't stretch enough, which I'm totally ashamed of. But I developed something super weird. And that is that now, and I have a friend who's a podiatrist, so I saw him. He's he's an amazing sports podiatrist. So if there's any listeners in the Seattle area that have a foot problem, I got a guy for you. And he's like, okay, this is not common, but what's happened is the muscle that lifts the toe is getting entrapped on the interior, like the inside, not the outside, the inside part of the ankle. And it's like I'll take a few steps, and then all of a sudden it's excruciating pain because it feels like my joint is crushing my tendon. And he's like, yeah, it is. I'm like, okay. So been doing more stretching, which is helping. Obviously, seeing my chiropractor is great. I've been doing all kinds of stuff, anti-inflammatory stuff, phototherapy. That's all helping. But it's not gone 100% away, and I'm going to seek out physical therapy. But I was wondering, like, hey, you talked about ankle, high cortisol. What would you say to someone, or me? What would you say to me? What did I do?
Is the pain in the big toe specifically?
So I don't feel any pain just sitting here. I'll just be walking, and then the joint will crush the tendon.
Yeah.
And also what's developed, because I started walking on the outside of my foot, which shortens that tendon, so it stops happening. But you don't ever do that. Don't walk on the outside of your foot, because now I'm getting a shooting nervy pain like around the big toe. I'm like, okay, everyone told me not to do that, and then I did it. So I'm not doing that anymore. But it's such a bummer, because now I can only do the bike or for cardio, because it's like even the pool messes it up. And he's like, yeah, you can't walk and you can't do the treadmill, you can't walk, you can't go do the pool. Like, I'm just stuck doing the bike, which is a bummer, because I like the variety. So, and also I can't, be more active. I have to kind of like not do things until I really heal this. And that is a good lesson to learn. Don't go 0 to 60 in any fitness protocol whatsoever. Just slowly ramp up. And I thought I was there. I thought I was ready to do 2 a day, and apparently I wasn't. So
good on you. I love your motivation. That's all great.
I'm super motivated, but my body was like, nope.
Too motivated.
A little too motivated.
So I have good news for you. liver too is an acupuncture point right at the area you were talking about in between between the big toe and the second toe. So typically it's a liver problem that causes that big toe to hurt. What I was referring to was, bunions and plantar fasciitis. That's all an adrenal problem or adrenal fatigue, typical mechanism that sets most of those problems up. But when it's specifically the big toe, it's liver, poor functioning of the liver. And I found it to be specifically related to glutathione production. So the liver, there's a key pathway in that liver, right, that functions to help, the detoxification and immune function. And it's very antioxidant dependent. I imagine, I'm confident that, what I do know of you, my new best friend, is that I imagine you're getting plenty of those. But we'd want to look at things to facilitate that glutathione reduction technically, but glutathione production. You do the right thing, and that toe pain literally would go away in minutes. I mean, so that's the good news, the beauty. I've had that kind of toe off tenderness on my big toe in the past. I have a liquid glutathione product I've used, and literally the minute it touches my tongue, the pain is gone in my toe. So that's how profound this kind of stuff can be.
Right? I have a phototherapy patch. I don't know if you've heard about this. I've had a few interviews about it, and I'm going to put it over GV. Wait, it's
liver two.
Well, no. So I like doing the liver channel up by the chest.
Yes. There's a glutathione point that so you have the glutathione
LV14, which is up by the it's like I know LV3 and that's by my foot, which I've been stimulating, but I have a patch that stimulates the body to produce more glutathione.
Yes.
I typically put it up by LV14 because that's like this gateway for the liver, but I'll try putting it down by in between those two toes, that little tender spot.
There's a glutathione reflex over the liver. Like if you put your left hand over the liver, so your long finger is going to be right at the spleen 21, if you will. So right, kind of, what would that be? Your second knuckle is going to be probably that LV14 point you were talking about. That is kind of where the body refers pain when glutathione is not functioning properly. So I would think putting that patch there should be super. I mean, you put it there. Within minutes, your toe is going to tell you whether it's the right place or not.
I'm gonna try it. So this is so much fun. You see, like, this is why people want to dive into this and advocate for themselves and learn this, because then, stuff happens. Maybe you sprain an ankle or something, and then all of a sudden, so many things that you can do. Like in homeopathy is another fascinating thing. Usually it's one of my family members has a symptom in the middle of the night. And I get up turn my flashlight on because I want to turn the lights on, turn my flashlight on, run to the bathroom. And I have this big cabinet full of homeopathic remedies, and I grab one and give it to them. And then boom, it's better. It's like, it's the coolest. And I'm half awake doing it. And I'm like, yep, that worked. Okay, go to bed. You only needed one dose. My husband once had this trapped gas feeling. He woke up in the middle of the night, and this was a few years ago, but he was just like, I feel like I can't come out both ends. It's just trapped gas. And he felt so weird. And I'm like, okay. I looked it up, grabbed the homeopathic, gave it to him, and immediately it just came out both ends. And he's like, oh, I feel so much better. You're like, burped and farted. And I'm like, how cool is this?
Right.
The homeopathy is amazing and weird and almost instant for so many people. And then that's like the least invasive, least toxic thing.
Totally.
And you know what? If it doesn't work, you got the wrong remedy, and that's okay too, because it's like it's not hurtful, right? It's not like the body's going to just come back into balance. And this is what I love about holistic medicine. We can go down all kinds of rabbit holes. You could do acupressure, like you said. You can push on these points on the body, and you can stimulate a specific response, right? You can change little things in your diet, specific and shift the body. So we can do things gently to make profound changes. And Dr. V, I want to have you back. This has been a
I'd love
true
to.
pleasure. I'd love for you to
Can I
come back
throw a
and
quick
teach.
thing out just to make sure listeners don't miss the fact that that sweet Ashley, wonderful Ashley, listeners just confirmed that she can do this in your sleep. So don't miss that aspect, huh?
Well, I was half asleep, you know. I got my little phone out, and I know what websites to go to and look up the remedies, and I have
In
the
your
remedies
sleep.
here, and half asleep. Well, you know, as moms, we kind of, I don't know about you, but as a mom, I'm sort of like, I always got one ear listening for, you know, if my son's going to cough or my husband's going to
Yes.
snore or whatever. And we're sort of just wired to be the herbalist, the healer of the whole house, right? And so we're
Yes.
just listening for everyone. And of course, I'm kind of one of those. I feel like it might be annoying to people, but the second my friends do come to me and they're like, "What do you think I should do for this?" And then I give them like a whole health lecture. They're like, "I can't believe that. How do you remember these things?" I'm like, I'm passionate. I'm so passionate. But I think at the end of the day, this is the gift God gave me. It took me a long time to find it. I think everyone is born with a gift, and this is the gift that God gave me, is my passion for helping people to help their body to come back into balance. And now my new best friend, it also is the exact same. God gave you the same
Yep.
gift too. And how cool is
100%.
that? Love it.
I
Love it.
couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show. Definitely going to have you back, especially when you launch the book in about a month. We'll have a big book party. So
Exciting.
headacheadvantage.com, listeners, definitely check it out. And then can you work with clients like telemedicine? Like, how does that work if they want to work with you?
I do, yeah. In fact, that the gallbladder gal doctor that I was telling you about, we actually did telemedicine while she was the passenger in a car, of all things,
Love it.
and was able to figure out that it was her gallbladder, and we solved that. So yes, I do telemedicine. I have several docs in my office as well, so that are all doing the same work, and most of them came to me as interns and kind of came up through the ranks that way. And I say that because at this point, I tend to be booking about 2 months out, which is good news, bad news. But yes, I still very actively treat people all day, every day, and try to do this book stuff on the side.
Nice. Well, good for you for duplicating yourself and for
Thank you.
finding true holistic, like-minded doctors who want to support the body's ability to heal itself. So I'm kudos to you. And if they go to your website, headacheadvantage.com, is that where they can find information about doing the telemedicine at your clinic, or is there a different website?
My office website is drvrzal, drvrzal.com.
Okay.
That's the office website.
Great. I'll make sure that the links to everything that Dr. Vrzal does is in the show notes of today's podcast at learntohealth.com. It's been such a pleasure having you. Is there
So fun.
anything left unsaid that you just really want to make sure you leave us with?
Oh,
Like ready for another hour?
Right, so much. But I mean, really, it comes down to listen to your body. You know, listeners, your body's trying to tell you a story. Pain is intended to elicit change. So when you have pain, it's not a deficiency of aspirin or Advil or Tylenol. It's your body yelling at you to go forth and learn, listen to what it's trying to tell you, so that you can thrive. I mean, it's your early warning that, you know, God forbid you've got a cardiovascular incident pending, looming, you know, or your hormones are not functioning right, so you're going to create mutated cells. So learn from what your body's trying to tell you so that you can thrive and enjoy this blessed life we have.
Love it. Awesome. Well, can't wait to have you back on the show. It's been such a pleasure.
So fun. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, Ashley.
These are the same supplements that I have been using myself personally, my family, and my clients for the last 12 and a half years. These are the same supplements that helped me to overcome my chronic diseases. I used to have type 2 diabetes, chronic adrenal fatigue, chronic infections, polycystic ovarian syndrome, infertility, and I don't have any of those things anymore. The holistic doctors that informed these supplements discovered that the root cause of disease is a lack of key nutrients. There are 90 essential nutrients the body needs, and we're not getting them from our food anymore because of the farming practices of the last 100 years. So no matter how healthy we eat, we're still missing what our body needs to create optimal health. Because you listen to this health podcast and you're looking for health solutions, you will love working with the team at takeyoursupplements.com. These are health coaches that overcame, just like me, overcame their own health issues using, of course, eating healthy lifestyle. But the key fundamental thing that they added were these supplements. These supplements encompass all 90 essential nutrients. And when you talk to your health coach, they will help to customize a plan specifically to your needs and your health goals. You will start feeling amazing right away. Within the first month of taking these supplements, everyone notices better sleep, more mental clarity, better energy, overall sense of well-being that takes over their life. And they are so happy that they got on these supplements. I want you to give it a try. There's a money-back guarantee. And there's amazing health coaches waiting to help you at takeyoursupplements.com. And it's free to talk to them. So what are you waiting for? Go to takeyoursupplements.com right now. Sign up for a free consultation. And in a month, you could be feeling on top of the world, just like I did. I was so sick. I felt so horrible. And I overcame that. I had to obviously make healthy choices around every area of my life. I had to change my diet. I had to change my lifestyle. But I needed to fill in those nutrient gaps. And that's where Take Your Supplements comes in. They help you to make sure that you're getting all 90 essential nutrients. So your cell, every cell in your body, all 37.2 trillion cells in your body will be bathed in all the nutrients that they need so that you can live an optimal life full of health and vitality at any age. Go to takeyoursupplements.com and talk to one of them. Today, they can help you right now to begin to make that health transformation. That's takeyoursupplements.com.